Welcome everybody, as I said, to the fourth Trust and Safety Forum. Feel free to come in. We are happy to have you back, and welcome to the new people. If you don't know me, I'm Caroline Humer. I will apologize in advance about the American accent. I am European at heart, was born in Switzerland, grew up in England and Wales, but I've been in the States for 22 years. Don't hold that against me, especially now. Happy to talk about politics over a coffee or drink, but not necessarily in the sessions. Jean-Christophe is on the other room, so feel free to say hi to him. He's my co-founder with the Trust and Safety Forum. We are happy to do this again here. We have an exciting 2 days planned, so we look forward to having you be part of these 2 days with the discussions and the workshops. Before I give it over to the first panel discussion, a couple of announcements. We have the reception this evening here at 6 p.m. Sponsored by AWS, so feel free to join us for that, and thank you AWS for sponsoring the reception again. Also, tomorrow, if you haven't looked at our Trust and Safety LinkedIn page or the program, then you have probably not seen that tomorrow. We are doing a full-day workshop thanks to the partnership with Tech Against Terrorism. All 3 workshops are focusing on the hybridization of online harms or online threats. We look forward to having some of you there. It is limited capacity because it's in a different room, and as it is a workshop and interactive, we sort of kept it to 50 people. I know many of you have signed up, so do not fear about that element. If you haven't, please let me know, and we'll figure out how we manage the whole group, but we would love to have you there. Then lastly, we have upcoming exciting new element of a Trust and Safety Forum, which is the Trust and Safety Festival. We started with the festival last year in Amsterdam with Concentrix and Tremont and a few others. We are now expanding into India. So this will be the first Trust and Safety Festival, and I believe the first Trust and Safety Conference in general in India. We're doing it in New Delhi the 7th and 8th of October. So if you are interested in joining or sponsoring, participating, and have ideas, feel free to reach out to me or to Jean-Christophe or JC. We'll be happy to talk to you probably after this event, just so that we can make sure we don't forget the conversation. But feel free to reach out to us. Oops, going the wrong direction, I think. Right, and lastly but not least, I want to say thank you to all of our partners that are generously supporting the Trust and Safety Forum, either today, this year for the first time. Some of you are supporting us for over the last 4 years, so we really appreciate it. So a special thank you to all of you who come back over and over every year. I know it's a busy conference circus with last week in London, next week in Amsterdam. We're sort of in the middle, so we appreciate you taking the time to come and be part of the Trust and Safety Forum. And hopefully the circus of the Trust INCYBER Forum is not keeping you away either. With that in mind, I'm going to pass it over to Francisca as the moderator for the first session. The last thing is each session is recorded. It will be available later in the summer on the INCYBER Forum YouTube page, so keep an eye out for that. Any session that you do not want to be recorded, please let me know in advance so that we can make sure it's not recorded for anyone that's speaking. Otherwise, enjoy. I'm here all day, so I'm your MC for this room, so feel free to ask any questions and interact as much as possible. So enjoy, and this is also.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nayani Tiraboski, and I'm here with Concentrix. I'm Global Director of Trust and Safety Operations. And I would love to introduce you to the panel today. Firstly, let's start with Antonella.
Hi, everybody. My name is Antonella Zara. I'm part of the DSA enforcement team at the European Commission in Brussels, where I'm part of a 130 people team that deal with the enforcement of the Digital Services Act. And I cover mostly transparency reporting, risk assessment, but also the AI-related harms on online platforms. Very happy to participate in this conversation.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Louis Victor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tremo. Tremo is a trust and safety solution provider that helps online platforms scale their moderation operations.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Margot. I'm the Trust and Safety Head of at Yubo. Yubo is a social discovery platform. We basically empower users to make connections online and make friends. And obviously, transparency and safety has been a very big focus for us since day one. So I'm glad to share our experience on that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samuel Comblé. I'm a psychologist for children. And I am the deputy CEO of e-Enfance, which is a French NGO which protects children online and from bullying in school. And we manage the 3018, which is an helpline to protect and to report some problem to the platform. And we have some jurists and psychologists who answer every day.
Great, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. I'll start with Antonella, who's going to remind us a little bit about transparency reporting under the DSA, and we will show some slides to us as well.
Thank you so much, Francisca. So today I will try to basically outline the transparency toolbox of the Digital Services Act. How many of you are familiar with the DSA? Okay, we have quite an expert crowd. So just to paint a picture of what we have allowed out there. So the DSA tries to enhance public scrutiny and accountability of online platforms by developing and employing different products and different tools, including transparency reporting obligations. We have a transparency database on which platforms and providers have to upload basically live their content moderation decisions with which they inform users. We also provide users with clear and accessible terms and conditions and every change to them. Recently, the Commission is managing a terms and condition database where users, researchers can keep track of the changes done to the terms and conditions of online platforms. There is an ADD library for all the advertisements that are published and shown to users in the EU that platforms and providers have to publish on their website. And the core of the DSA and actually the core of my activity as an enforcer is to supervise and monitor the risk management framework that applies to very large online platforms and search engines that are obliged to publish every year risk assessments, reports, mitigation measures, as well as they are externally audited by third parties. Another important point of the transparency toolbox of the DSA is the data access provision. So it's the first time that vetted researchers that make research on systemic risks under the DSA. This may be risk to elections, the risk for minors, risk for mental health. These researchers can have access to data of the platforms. And finally, there is a whistleblower tool by which stakeholders, employees can actually reach out to the Commission and expose potential infringements or worse practices. When it comes to transparency obligations, specifically transparency reporting ones, VLOPs, or the very large online platforms, have to publish every 6 months their transparency reports, while the non-VLOPs are obliged to publish every year. Recently, actually in February this year, we have the first round of transparency reports by non-VLOPs, and there are several obligations according to the size and the type of the providers. Just to name a few, providers of all the service providers have to report on the number of notices that they receive, the number of orders they receive from member states authorities, as well as the voluntary takedowns and the own initiative content moderation. They also have to report for the first time on the automated means used for content moderation, both in terms of metrics for accuracy, recall, precision, error rates, and they are also obliged to give more explanations about the qualitative aspects of content moderation, so to say. There are additional obligations for online platforms providers that have also to report on the number of disputes to out-of-court dispute settlement bodies, as well as suspensions, according to Article 23 of the DSA. And finally, one of the major changes introduced by the DSA transparency reporting is introduced by Article 42, that applies only to the large ones, by which the providers of VLOPs and VLOPs have to publish every 6 months their users in the union, but also they have to give to the public access to the expertise in terms of language of their content moderation, which is a very first attempt to give transparency on this in this regard. I will maybe stop here and give the floor to the rest.
Yeah, sure. This has already been very comprehensive. I really appreciate. I feel like in the last year or so, a lot of platforms have been trying to adjust their data processing systems and have also been sort of scrambling to find resources. Some platforms now are not so large to make sure that they are attending to the regulations and all the expectations. I know that the Commission is coming out with a standardized template, which will again make platforms sort of renew their efforts to how they are collecting data, what sort of data they are collecting. And I want to hear a little bit from our platform person here, Margot. I want to hear how you're preparing for this and what sort of impact do you see it having on your operations, because obviously the day-to-day operations will carry on what you're doing on the day-to-day, but transparency reporting is really important now.
Yeah, thank you. So just to give you a little bit of a background on Yubo, we are a social discovery platform with different features, live streaming, etc., and we have minors and over 18 on the platform. So from day one, we really develop what we call the safety by design approach, which means that you're really focusing on anticipating harms. And so that means having a clear alignment on how your product is implemented in your operation and so on. And one of the big pillars to that was transparency, in the sense that if you want to make sure that your safety by design works, you need to educate your users. You need to communicate what they do well, about what they don't do well, and why. And we found out that education was really a mean through which we could reduce bad actors on the platform. So because of this, we always had that sort of like transparency in mind and processes that helped us with all the regulations coming. We started to do transparency report back in 2022. So obviously maybe not with all the compliance that is required now, but we have had the habit of referring to metrics, KPI, context, and really explain what we do in terms of safety strategy. Now, with the new regulation coming and the new formatting, there are a few things that obviously are going to impact us either way. Just so you know, we are not yet considered as a very large platform, but we're still entitled to those regulations. So in terms of changes, we have, first of all, the formatting and the taxonomy, in the sense that we need to make sure that we refer to the same metrics, to the same way that we qualify those definitions, etc. So that takes a lot of time and a lot of resources to make sure that we all set. But then it also pressures your resources to be able to specialize in compliance. Compliance now is becoming a day-to-day role. And very often when you work in operation, you have your legal team on one side, you have your product team on the other, your operation team on the other. So you need to create that alignment that can be extremely challenging, and making sure that you are speaking the same language and trying to unify your expertise around that. Another aspect has been that we've been talking about moderation for years, but now we're really focusing on risk management and assessment when it comes to trust and safety. And I think that gives you more perspective of developing roles and making sure that all those metrics and accountability that we need to create are owned and shared and understood by anyone in those functions. So it's really creating new function. In terms of challenges, what we see is that, first of all, that template is going to be very time-consuming to fill. So automation is really something that we are going to need, because the alignment is one thing, but the filling stuff is another. Creating more alignment within organization. So as I was telling you, when you work in a safety by design approach, that's a +1, but making sure that your product team is able to generate the right data, etc., and that you can use them and make sense of them is really another point. So I think all of those things have been things that we've been thinking through based on the product and the approach that we've been taking, but we still see quite a lot of challenging stuff moving forward.
Louis, I want to hear from you. What do you see as the impact, both negative and positive, of these standardized reporting procedures?
Thanks very much. And it's somewhat difficult to go after you, Margot, and Yubo, because Yubo has been at the forefront of transparency from the get-go. As you mentioned, you did your first transparency report even before it became an obligation, right? So it's always been quite impressive to see how you have continued to scale. But you also mentioned a number of the challenges that arise. And I think there's a number of elements that you said which are really critical within the industry and how we see transparency evolving as well, not just as being a tick-a-box exercise, because otherwise it's a bit pointless, but how it is really used, and you said a key term in terms of risk management. How do companies, how are platforms able to mitigate or to manage the risk of harms occurring on their platforms on a day-to-day basis, rather than on every 6 months or every year or whenever you need to do an assessment element. We at Tremo have helped a number of platforms with their risk assessment, from the biggest to the smallest, and even at the biggest platforms, you know, sometimes it's taken up to 3 weeks to a month to get some data, which seems to be absolutely essential in the beginning of any risk management system. And we see how difficult it is to surface that type of data if you haven't thought about it from the get-go, if you haven't built the infrastructure that enables you to scale your trust and safety operations. Scaling your trust and safety operations also means, as you said, working outside of traditional silos. Trust and safety is no longer just a trust and safety issue. It's a legal, it's a compliance, it's a operations, it's a product, it's an engineering issue that needs to report back up to the board and to the management or to the senior management of the company to take good approaches, to take the right level of risk mitigation approaches. By this, I mean, you know, some companies think that having nudity on their platform is bad. Some platforms live off nudity of their platform, right? That doesn't mean that, you know, one is good or one is bad. It means that, you know, they've taken a risk approach saying, this is how I see, and this is what I allow for my users on my platform. Tying all of this back to transparency, I think that requiring a lot of this requirements of getting some of these data points that you mentioned, Antonella, that was very specific, is essential to achieving what we were just speaking about around, you know, having a better insights as to how you operate, what are the risks on the platform. What we're seeing is a number of companies really struggling on the classification, but struggling also because they built their operations over time on diverse set of tools that are not made for trust and safety. The number of companies and of large companies using Salesforce, Zendesk, and other types of very good tools, but tools that are not built for trust and safety, is quite astonishing, and they will never really be able to scale or to automate the reporting of these metrics on those types of systems.
Yeah, it's definitely very challenging to couple all that information when they come from such different systems, right? But I also want to hear a little bit someone from you, because obviously we are talking about transparency reports and numbers and you know, metrics, but this has a real impact in the real world, right? I wanted to hear your perspective of like how regulation is improving your work on the day-to-day.
Yes, thank you. Since November 6, 2024, the helpline 3018 has been the first trusted flagger designated in France. After this recognition, platforms began organizing communication with us. Some, especially messaging services and gaming websites, now contact us proactively. They want to improve collaboration and be seen as serious, trusted partners. We need to set up new tools to collect and analyze data after each report, the number of reports, platform response times, outcomes, and types of contents removed. This statistic will feed into our annual transparency report, because we have to do it like the platforms. The biggest challenge is accessing reliable information. For example, our current software doesn't track the exact time a platform takes to answer. This technical limitation means we must upgrade our systems. The workload is heavy. In 2024, we received 160,000 requests, 3 times more than in 2023. This increase brings more pressure on quality, speed, and legal rigor of each report. Due to lack of funding, we can only answer 50% of calls. In reality, we need about 10 more staff members to respond properly. We also like adequate data management software, which allows our follow-up and evaluations. To meet this growing demand, funding for trusted flaggers are become critical. Today, we must secure our funding independently.
Thank you. I want to go back to Margot on the trusted flaggers, since we are talking about it. How are you communicating with trusted flaggers and sort of enabling them to make those reports? And Louis, I also would love to hear from you about like how trusted flaggers are important, sort of new update on the DSA, right? Because we didn't have that before. Obviously, it would be users reporting to platforms, but it's so important to have this extra layer of sort of reporting.
Yep. So again, I think our collaboration with NGOs and organizations has been going way back. Like we've been doing it since day one, because, you know, as a platform with young users, we really wanted to get involved in campaigns and education. So those relationships, I think, are built over time, and they go also beyond those processes. And we're happy to have, you know, decided and made those decisions. But when it comes to trusted flaggers, in terms of process, very operational, we've set up a dedicated email so that, you know, trusted flagger could contact us. We've aligned on a template and standardized information of what is required from trusted flaggers for us to be able to retrieve those information and take action. Obviously, we prioritize those requests based on the urgency of the scenario. But I think the midterm vision here is to be able to implement those processes within our product and making it accessible on the application. But like any big regulation and swift and change that you need to implement, you need to have a bit of a minimum viable product mindset, which means that it's like, okay, what do I do first to be able to get that running? And then you iterate. Because if you're just waiting for the perfect solution to happen, either you have budget issues, resources issues, or time issues, and you don't go anywhere. So that's the approach that we've been setting. For now, we are not receiving lots of volume related to that, but at least the channel is open, and obviously we'll continue iterating on the process.
Thank you. As you said, the trusted flaggers are really a cornerstone of the Digital Services Act and of its enforcement capabilities, also with out-of-court dispute bodies, because they are these external bodies that, as Samuel mentioned, need to provide transparency report at an annual basis, and that will continue to feed this data machine, which is the Digital Services Act. Right? There are going to be critical types of information that, you know, enforcers or digital service coordinators, the regulators, will be able to capitalize on in their, you know, enforcement actions, etc. it's not always easy, and as Samuel mentioned, for the trusted flagger, but nor for the company or for the platform itself to put in place these processes, because they're processes that are sometimes heavy. Margot, you spoke about templates. Some companies, how do you prioritize? How do you build that in directly in the platform? How do you make sure it's accessible? How do you make sure that the email you use isn't, used by somebody else, somebody who got access to that email address and is doing as if it was a trusted flagger? How do you put in the security levels in place? And then on the trusted flagger side, how do you communicate more easily with the platform? How do you make sure that you don't have one system, one process per platform, because that's just not manageable at scale? So there probably will be at some level of discussion at some point of how do we standardize that process. But that, I don't know, I turn to the Commission.
Yeah, I was going to say, Antonella, can you enlighten us on that one?
So we really acknowledge the role of trusted flaggers as key players in fighting illegal content online. So as I was mentioning earlier, the Commission is going to issue guidelines on trusted flaggers in the course of the year, and there will be a public consultation open soon with the draft text, where everybody is invited to consult and give their feedback. This is, again, to streamline and facilitate the life of trusted flaggers, but also platforms. As you know, like most of the content moderation that now happens is by own initiative, actually, of platforms, via automated means, via human review, but the role of users is at the center in the DSA framework. So trusted flaggers, as well as user reports, notices under Article 16 are key instruments that we want to encourage users to use. And then we hope that platforms will implement in their own processes.
I think one of the things I would love to hear from you, Antonella, in the Commission's point of view, beyond the transparency reports, what can we expect coming next? I know that lots of people that are here are working for platforms and want to be prepared. We know that the standardized template is coming up soon, but what can we sort of start preparing for this year and the year to come in terms of DSA, but other regulations that might change the landscape of reporting?
Absolutely. So just to give more context on the templates and how they came to life, I'll maybe show the next slides, which might help. So why we came to the conclusion that a template was needed. Before the current cycle of reporting, the reporting period was different across platforms. The format, which the DSA says must be machine readable, was really different. It was interpreted in a very different way. You had PDFs, HTML, and Excel files. So since one of the goals of the DSA is to build this framework of public accountability, we also wanted researchers and other regulators to be able to see what platforms are doing. So that's why we came up with the Implementing Act that was adopted in November. The templates are built also after a public consultation, several meetings with platforms, as well as researchers that work in trust and safety. We want to think about the templates as an ally to trust and safety in the business, because, as you guys said, it's really important to change the way we think about risk management and trust and safety in the companies. When it comes to the timeline, in July the templates will be officially adopted, so companies will have to report according to the templates starting from July, and the first date for them to publish according to the templates will be in February 2026. And in order for platforms to be ready, it's been, I think, we will give them 6 months overall to adapt their system and processes. These will come also in alignment with the transparency database of the Statement of Reasons, which will change in July as well according to the new taxonomy of illegal content. And actually from tomorrow, starting from tomorrow, the non-VLOPs can join the sandbox environment and test the new taxonomy before going into production. So again, the full alignment will come in July this year. I also want to mention the Data Access Delegated Act, that is another important element of this framework. The Commission is working on a delegated act that will be published hopefully by the end of the year. We are still revising the text after the public consultation. We received lots of contributions from business and researchers and CSO as well. So this is also another element. What else? The ad repository, we have this terms and condition database that was managed by Open Terms Archive, and now it's under the Commission. I really invite you to go and check it out, because you can keep track of all the changes to platforms policies, and it's also, again, an instrument for researchers and also regulators in the member states to investigate and monitor compliance with the DSA.
I really appreciate to hear that there is still consultation going on, and there are a lot of platforms can still have their saying on how reporting can be done or how can be improved. I wanted to ask Louis, Margot, and yourself, Samuel, if it was a perfect word, what would you improve on the reporting process of DSA? Or what would you like to see next after this iteration that is coming up at summer?
That's a big question. I think there is something, I think it's great to set up standards, you know, because it's going to create accountability and making sure that we're creating a common performance framework, which is really important. But in the meantime, I think context is really key when you look at metrics, and platforms have their singularity and uniqueness in the sense that they have specific user base, specific risk, etc. And so based on that, I think there is still this need to kind of balance the two, having that framework and those standards, but make sure that that particularity of each platform can be taken into account. And then another thing is, obviously, we have regulation from Europe, but then when you're a platform with global markets, you know, with users in the UK, with users in the US, like, there needs to be a sort of harmonization between those regulations, because it becomes really complicated for platform to know what they need to refer to. So obviously you take the higher standard as your lighthouse, you know, but at the meantime, it does create operational strain and confusion. And for efficiency purpose, I think it's really important to also have that into account.
That's an important point. I mean, we can already see what the UK is going to be asking in terms of transparency data, what Europe is asking, even what Europe is asking in terms of different regulations, right? Because you have the TCO and the DSA regulation, and then what Australia is going to ask, Singapore is going to be asking, what India is going to be asking. All of these are different. And as you know, in tech, if you have a small difference, it's still a difference, and you still need to code it. And so it's actually creating a load of complexities for platforms. It's a good news if there is some level of harmonization. We don't know how far it's actually going to be able to go. One of just going back to the question you asked, which was in terms of what do we want to see, one of the things we're currently working on, so that at Tremos, I didn't mention at the beginning, but we've got two sides of the business. We've got this content moderation platform, but we also have an advisory arm. And we're currently working for one of the VLOPs who ask us to look at all the transparency reports that are being published and try to identify, you know, can we start seeing some benchmarks in terms of the different categories. And can we see, you know, across similar platforms? So there is a huge part of the work, which is how do you identify what platforms are similar or not, because you need to compare apples to apples, and, you know, different platforms are very different and have different audiences, different protections, with different policies. But how can you try and across the board, not just on the 25 VLOPs, but across the board, start seeing, okay, this is what, you know, on this harm particularly, this is what, you know, good looks like, or this was what, you know, at least industry looks like for the time being. I think that's one of the things that are currently lacking, and I hope that all the transparency works that will happen in the coming years. This is the first cycle, but for non-VLOPs, but that we will continue to see will enable us to continue to work on these.
And for me, in my place, because I am the trusted flagger, I would try to know how many moderators are mobilized in each platforms, because the victim ask it every day, and for me it's very important to know, for example, how much artificial intelligence is used in the moderation, when AI works alone, when it is controlled by a human, and what results this brings. And finally, it's important to know how much money platforms really spend on content moderation. Without this information, it's impossible to know how if platform truly prioritize user safety. And people ask regularly what is the level of their how to say their level of will, and we have to answer to this question, and it's very important.
Yeah, as a service provider that works with so many big clients, one of the things that are top of mind for us as well is centralization. As you know, most of those reports are published now on their own companies' websites and platforms. But some of the conversations we are having is, what about centralizing those, maybe the VLOPs to start with, and then going into other companies of different sizes? I really appreciate when you mentioned the benchmarks, because these are also sort of one of the points of centralizing this data, right? We are putting most of those reports together. What are the trends that we are seeing, and how can we continue to improve the reporting if there is a specific trend that is presenting itself? Louis, I wanted to just hear a little bit about your clients and how sort of you are advising them on sort of centralizing and sort of establishing those benchmarks. Can you speak a little bit more about it? Because I thought it was very interesting.
Thanks. Quick self-promotion. You have a database on our website, the DSA database, which has all the transparency reports, all the...
there you go. You have a solution.
There you go. So you can go check there. So you're...
On the benchmarks, I wanted to hear a little bit more of how you're establishing those benchmarks.
So the project is ongoing, and a lot of it is because we're still waiting for a lot of the transparency reports to be published from the non-VLOP. So we're starting to collect them, and then it will be assessing them across different categories and trying to understand what form of standardization we can derive from the reporting, and then how we can, identify trends, numbers, percentages, prevalence rate. But one of the elements that I just want to jump on is, Antonella, when you were looking at the transparency metrics, one of the elements you mentioned is accuracy rates, error rates of content moderation systems, which refers also a bit to what you were saying, Samuel. Those data points can be calculated in a lot of different ways, and I think we still need to wait for standardized definitions or calculation metrics or calculation formulas to make sure that everybody is actually using the same. We've been quite astounded when we've been speaking to some of the platforms and big platforms that still rely for AI accuracy rates on the vendors to tell them how accurate they are, right? So you're asking, the person who's written the homework to correct its own homework. Right? That's also the lack of infrastructure a lot of these platforms have. That's something that's really important, but it's not trivial. It's actually very complex to build in at scale.
Yeah. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to just second what you said about context. Context is really important, and the templates are just the starting point of potentially you can write up your transparency report and just attach the template as an additional input. But it's really, I think for us it was key also hearing from the platforms to give them the space to give contextual information about the metrics. And then accuracy, recall, and all these metrics, it's precisely this, right? So everyone measures their own accuracy rates in a different way. We didn't want to come up with a definition precisely because we know that the industry standards are changing, and these metrics are developed by people that are close to the business. So we wanted to just give the indication that accuracy can mean different things. We try to spell it out a bit more, giving for instance, we refer to positions and recall rates. But again, context is key, so we really encourage platforms to explain to the average user, to the regulator, to the researcher, what accuracy means in the context of their content moderation practices. And to reply to the question of what I would like to have is precisely this proactiveness by platforms in terms of explaining and putting themselves also in the shoes of users that don't understand how their system works, and providing them clear and accessible language with regard to the functioning of their systems.
Well, I think we covered so much, but I would like to open for questions if we have time, Caroline. So maybe 1 or 2 questions. Yeah?
My name's Don Sparks. I work with INCYBER. So a question for you, Antonella. What's the roadmap for reporting on reporting? When will the industry know the impact of what the DSA has had on the wider industry? And that's hard.
That's a very good question. We are now, I think, at the 4th cycle of reporting for VLOPs and the first one for non-VLOPs, right? So, and the first harmonized one will be next year. I think this is a learning curve, and we're all learning, both the regulator and the providers, and also platforms like Tremo that are helping in this whole process. I think it's a long-term challenge, and we have to be patient on all sides. We have opened some cases, some infringement cases on some of the DSA-related provisions that refer to transparency, such as data access. But I think transparency reporting is still in development, right? So we try to also accommodate the needs of the business that, for instance, if a certain template, a certain data point is not relevant for your business, you don't have to report on that. I think we try to be flexible in that regard, saying that this is a template, you can do more, you are encouraged to do more, and we are all in the same, let's say, boat.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah?
Is there going to be a form of auditing, because doing a transparency report is something, but that means how can you trust what is there first, and how can you eventually go after and get into the data? I don't know, so is there something that is scheduled on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Commission, as the enforcer of the VLOP, so I can talk about that. We can send requests for information to platforms regarding their practices, and content moderation is one of the mitigation measures that they have to take into account when performing the risk assessment. So we've sent requests for information, for instance, to X when it comes to their transparency reports, to the porn platforms that were designated earlier last year. So again, we have some enforcement tools that we are putting in place. There are also external audits that are performed when it comes to the very large online platforms, are performed by third-party auditors that have to check for all the obligations of the DSA, including transparency reporting. So they go through how they implement the process, how they draft the report, and there is this third-party scrutiny as well.
And one element I'd like to add also is we go back to the role of trusted flaggers and out-of-court dispute bodies. When Samuel, e-Enfance will be publishing its transparency report, or when Point Contact will be transparency, they will be saying how many, requests they've sent to platforms, and then platforms will also be saying how many requests they've received. So if I put myself in the shoes of the regulator, the first thing I'd go is to try and see which one match and which one don't match, and then I know where to go. There's going to be a lot of areas and mechanisms to be able to identify identify the platforms that potentially are in breach or that are not, doing what they should be doing in terms of transparency.
And I think to the point that Margot made earlier of informing your users, educating them, there will be so much more scrutiny as well of those numbers. And I feel like if a platform is being upfront of what they are doing, it will increase trust in their users, and I feel like they will be more educated to know when the numbers are right or not. Margaret.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think transparency overall needs to be seen as a change of mindset for some platforms, you know, and you shouldn't be looking at just the transparency report and what numbers are there, but it's really what is the platform is doing to create more accountability, transparency with users, and making sure that, you know, things are clear and straightforward for everybody, because at the end of the day, trust, as you were saying, is created through safety, through transparency, and that's what ultimately is going to create growth and engagement on your platform. So it's in platform's interest to do that in the first place. And if one platform is starting to set an example, very often a user is not using just one platform, is using many of them. So it's just creating expectations and standards that are very important and should have been looked at from just one, you know, requirement.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for this great opening session and important session on the DSA.